The stars are now in alignment for this review.
The game has been rigged. Forget all the rules. Stop believing what you're told. All this hate that I feel for you, my one true enemy. Once was blind, but now I see. It makes me question why.
So after I talked about Resident Evil 4 last week, a couple people mentioned that the Mega Man Battle Network collection came out. And yeah, that's great. I totally called that was going to happen when I did my retrospective, and I'm super excited I was right about that, but it makes sense. I mean, Battle Network was a very successful series, and they made every other collection. Why not put Battle Network out there too? And they did. But, I really have no plans to cover that collection, because why would I do that? They're not really remakes, it's a collection. I know there are a couple changes like online multiplayer, which is a great addition, but I mean, it's still just the Battle Network games, and I already talked about all of them. So there's really no reason for me to talk about the collection when it's not like it's, you know, a remake or anything. But I still wanted to talk about Mega Man, since obviously it's a hot button topic right now, and, well, there is one series I didn't touch when I did my retrospective. I made allusion to it, I directly addressed it at the end and explained why I didn't talk about it, which was that I just haven't played it. But I have started to play it now, and that is of course the Mega Man Star Force series. Star Force is a weird case, because it's like the one Mega Man thing that's a whole series, it's not like a weird spin-off, that is almost entirely forgotten by most people. You don't see it brought up that much. And I think I know why. For one thing, it wasn't as successful as something like the original series or X or Battle Network. It also isn't necessarily unique enough to have a cult following like Legends. Yeah, Legends is pretty obscure, but the fans that do know about it and love it really love it. And I get that, I'm there with you guys. But Star Force is just an odd duck, where it has some unique things about it, and it is unique in some of its ways. But it's also pretty similar to Battle Network at the same time, and it does technically take place in the same universe as Battle Network, just 200 years in the future. But outside of that, it has nothing to do with the overall story or any of the characters, or even any of the NetNavis from Battle Network. In fact, it doesn't even have anything to do with NetNavis hardly at all. Like, yes, they still exist in the universe, but the actual focus, and this incarnation of Mega Man, is not a NetNavi at all. He's a human-alien hybrid. Yes, really. Now, already I've lost plenty of you, and believe me, I was super skeptical too, because I think one of the issues I had with Star Force, because I do remember seeing it on store shelves when I was, you know, looking for games when I was a teenager. I remember seeing it. Never touched it, though. And the reason is because it just looked so insane. It's peak anime, is what it is. And for some people, that might be a good thing. For me, like, I like anime, but there's a limit. Let me put it in Ape Escape format, actually. The first Ape Escape was very anime, but I love that game. However, Ape Escape 3 is really violently anime, like Sailor Moon levels of transformation and everything. Like, 3 is out of control in that regard. That's kind of how Star Force feels, where, yeah, Battle Network was kind of designed to cash in on the anime boom that was going on, and to an extent, Mega Man has always had some level of inspiration from anime as a whole. It's not like the anime cutscenes haven't existed in the other series too. But, Star Force goes completely over the line with it, just like full tilt into straight up, to the point that its anime adaptation is classified as Magical Boy. That's the level we're at with this. But does that make it bad? Well, no. Not even a little bit. Not at all, actually. I'll be real with you, it completely exceeded all my preconceived notions. Like, yeah, everything I just told you is true, but once you actually play it, it's not nearly as full tilt as it came off, and even though in some ways it still kinda is, it's still a really, really fun experience. Like, genuinely so. I'll be real with you, if you played Battle Network and wanted more after 6 and didn't play Star Force, you're probably doing yourself a disservice because, as a whole, on the whole, it is designed and modeled off of Battle Network, but taking things in a little bit of a different direction. Just slightly. To the point of adding a third dimension, I mean. These games were made for the Nintendo DS, and the DS was a much more capable piece of hardware than the GBA was. As a result, instead of doing the 3x3 grid gameplay, the battle system revolves around, well, a single row that you get, but it's in 3D, and you control Mega Man in the third person. You also don't really go into the digital mainframe anymore, or the internet. I mean, you do, but not in the same way. It doesn't work at all like that. Because, yes, there are aliens, and the game goes full tilt into that concept. Extraterrestrials are not something that are unusual in the Mega Man series on the whole. It has been a thing that has occurred in other elements of Mega Man. In other series, it has happened. Even in Battle Network, too. But Star Force's whole thing is focusing on that, where these aliens called EM beings, electromagnetic. They basically exist as waves, and they can interact with things that are electronically linked. They can't necessarily directly interact with the real world unless they merge with a person. Their abilities are limited until they bond with a human being. That could be done in a few ways, usually through some level of consent, but most of the evil ones manipulate the negative emotions of their hosts. Either way, though, that's kind of how this works. And the EM beings exist from two different planets, Planet AM and Planet FM. Yes, we're going full tilt into the radio metaphors. The Ephemians are the main ones, and the AMians are thought to have been wiped out by the Ephemians. The Ephemian you're directly dealing with most of the time is known as Omega Exus. He's the one who merges with the main character, Geostellar. Seriously, that's his name, in order to become Mega Man. I suppose I can't complain that much about the names because we did just talk about Battle Network last time I talked about Mega Man, and that main character was named Local Area Network. So, you know, whatever. It's a name, and they just go full tilt into it. Geo, however, is one of the most reluctant protagonists I've ever seen in my entire life. The dude doesn't want to do anything. Because his father died in space, even though he still has a fascination with it, he has crippling depression and to some degree antisocial personality disorder. Like, he obviously has the makings of a hero and he has a good heart, but he really is terrified to become friends with anybody and doesn't like talking to people or even going outside. It is the influence of Omega Exus, sometimes by directly dragging Geo places, that gets him to actually try to make new friends. The overarching theme of the plot is about how personal bonds are more important than electronic ones. Like, technology can be a tool to make friends, but those bonds are what's really important. Human-to-human interaction. It shouldn't all just be restricted to machines, which, in the modern day, I concede, kinda has some lessons to teach us even now. Remember, this is 200 years post Battle Network, which was already a universe that was very, very digitally linked. Now it's even more so, where literally everything is hooked up to a network, but the focus is less on that and more about the whole space thing. The Ephemians have very radically different designs, and I'd almost want to say, to a degree, not completely, but you could kind of say that Star Force is to Battle Network what Mega Man X is to the original series. Not only do they take place hundreds of years apart, but even the overarching themes are sometimes more serious, and they have a different tone and slightly varied gameplay. Not so much that it's unrecognizable, but it is different. And I think that's the best way to explain Star Force when you're trying to compare it to Battle Network. Because the overarching map, when it comes to doing things isn't that dissimilar from Battle Network. It still has the random encounters, it still is running around on paths. In that way, it looks pretty similar. Except now we have two screens to work with, there are some touchscreen minigames, and the battle system, while similar, is still very, very different. You still have the card mechanics, but the 3D element takes things in a lot of different directions. For example, since I didn't want to program you moving forward and having a 3x3 area, you can actually jump onto the enemy squares by locking onto them. That's just a normal thing you can do. And that's very helpful, especially if you have a sword chip or something. There's also a default shield mechanic, which is super helpful too, as there are some moves that are undodgeable without using that. So it does not just make it a 3D battle network. They could have done that. They actually made it a lot different in other ways too. I actually found it a lot of fun, both from a story perspective and from a gameplay perspective. Geo is sometimes mind-numbingly difficult when it comes to doing anything, but it almost works because Omega X's is hilarious. He wants to do everything. They're almost polar opposites in this regard, and he always is trying to drag Geo out to do stuff. He lives in Geo's Trancer, which is basically this digital smartwatch type thing that everyone seems to have. They're kind of like an evolution of the pets from Battle Network, but they don't really work the same way, at least not for your purposes, since the being that's living in your Trancer is a friggin' alien, and most other people have like a NetNavi or something, like a normal human being. No, Geo's the one who got the alien. There's also a huge focus on these things called brother bands, which is way too long of a name than should have really shortened that. The brother bands are basically these very, very special secret friendships that you should only have with people you truly 100% trust, and you can post your secrets on your pages for other people to see. So it's like a private social network page, basically, except you can only have like 6 of them and they're really close and very important bonds that you can form with people. I don't know, that's the one element of the plot where I'm like, that's a little weird, and frankly to me causes many a security risk. And in fact, a major portion of the gameplay is jumping onto people's private pages to get information that you need that they wouldn't tell you otherwise. So in a way, it starts you out as being a hacker. It's just the only reason you can do this is because you exist in EM form when you're Mega Man. You are an electromagnetic being once you merge with Omega X's. So you can effectively jump into anything you want and no one can stop you. You know, it's a good thing Geo actually isn't very outgoing, because he has a lot of moral quandaries about it. It's Omega that pressures him. Without that, Geo never would stoop that low. He actually is a pretty good kid. In terms of complaints about the game, there aren't many, but I will try to nitpick a little bit. For one thing, Capcom had the audacity, the tremendous Omega class audacity to deliver 3 different versions of the game: Pegasus, Leo, and Dragon. And there really isn't that much of a difference between any of them. There's no reason to really play them beyond each other, like you can get one and be fine. The chipsets are slightly different, and the super form you get is also different, but outside of that, they're pretty much the same game. It's just there's 3 of them, and like, I know Pokemon does this, but this is so not the same thing. Okay, even Pokemon's getting a little tired with doing that. They get away with it because they're so big, but even there, like having different Pokemon you can get in different versions of the game, like come on, it's the modern age, you can just release one version. They even used to do that to a degree. There'd be a 3rd special version that kind of merges the two and has the canon story, like Crystal or Platinum, but that's not the case here. These 3 were released alongside each other, and they don't really have anything that different. There's really no reason to play one over the other. It's just, what do you prefer, a Pegasus, a lion, or a dragon? Yes, I played the dragon. Of course I played dragon. It just seems like kind of a waste of time to me to go with 3 different versions, like you're really reaching there. Additionally, the supporting cast drives me nuts. I hate like every child in this game that isn't named Geo or Sonia. Everyone else is cringe or a bully, and I can't stand them. Literally, one of the first things that happens is because Geo isn't going to school, the class president Luna and her cronies feel the need to harass him about this and insists he show up to school, because since she's the president, it is so important that he be there. Otherwise, it makes her look bad. I hate these people. I hate them. I hate them so much. Most of the game they're doing this, and yet somehow, for some reason, you're still supposed to be motivated to save them because Gio's a good kid, like I said, and I get that. I don't want them to die, but I also hate them. Sonia, however, is wonderful, and her and Gio's little romantic bond is actually the sweetest thing in the world, and I will protect them at all costs. They are too pure for this plotline. There are some other supporting characters, but just, I don't know, I just couldn't really latch onto everybody. Like, nobody seemed really that cool except, like, some of the aliens and Omega X's himself. Like, it feels like they're just trying too hard to push the brother bond thing. And also, there's the random encounters. Now, I went over this when I talked about the early Battle Network games especially, and I would think that with the follow-up series they would have learned from that, but no, the random encounters are out of control. They happen all the time. The rate is just too high. And yeah, there is a reason to do it because you get money and new chips like that, and I understand that to a degree, but boy howdy, does it drive me nuts. And there are a few times where I feel like the game is intentionally trying to stall me. There was at least one occasion specifically where, okay, you can only get into the EM area through certain points. You can't just go in anywhere. Why that is, I'm not sure, since you become living energy, and this doesn't seem to limit any of the other enemy characters at all, but either way, at one point you have to go in and out of the EM area into the real world, like 3 times, which, okay, whatever. It's tedious, but okay. But then you go to the point to go in, and it stops you, and all it says is that it's not working right now. You have to go to the other screen to go in a different one that's further away, just so you can walk the long way. They went out of their way to make sure I did that, and it only pads it out another minute or 2 tops to the game. Why? Why would you do that? Why would you ever do that? There is no reason to pad out an RPG like this. It already has a very high encounter rate. It does not need artificial blockers in order to make the game longer. It's not like this is that short of a game. It's a pretty decent 15-hour to 20-hour experience, you know, if you really plow through it and don't look around or try to get extra things or anything like that. Which is already not bad for, you know, a handheld RPG of the time. That would be okay. Like, there's no problem with that. But in order to make it even longer, you actually put artificial walls in the way just to make sure, we don't want you to be that smart. We want you to go our way. And it wasn't like there was some kind of cutscene or enemy that I had to run into. It wasn't like something they put in there to avoid me soft-locking the game or something. No. Nothing happened when I went the long way, except the thing that was supposed to happen, which is I got to the point that I would have gotten to even if I went the short way. You just wouldn't let me do the short way in that one instance. And hilariously, when I went back to check it again, like a minute after I did it the long way, suddenly, mysteriously, the short way is working again. This is annoying! Okay, if you're a game designer, speaking as a player, never do this. We hate it. Every single person who plays a game like this hates it when you do that. Fortunately, the actual quests usually do feel like they matter. It does seem like every time there is a crisis going on, with one of the Ephemians going crazy and trying to manipulate a human's negative emotions in order to do something terrible. Now, seriously, actually, they get pretty hardcore. Pretty much all of them at some point try to murder somebody. It's generally something they do pretty often, actually. I mean, the first one hijacks a car and almost kills a bunch of kids. The second one tries to asphyxiate a bunch of people, because wow. So yes, the enemies are very hardcore in their approach to things, so you do feel like overall the missions are very serious. It's just the ridiculous padding element that drives me nuts, and I feel like there is a lot more wandering through the mazes than there should be. Like, there's really no reason to have specific entry points, if you ask me. Like, I know that does make the game longer, but it's artificial. It doesn't really enhance the experience. It just kind of wastes your time. But I will say that I got very invested in the story as I played it. And this was a really fun game that I kind of wish I would have given a chance when I was younger. I didn't. I just didn't. I saw it on the shelf and just thought it looked like it was beneath me because I was going through my, I am a 15-year-old and I am very mature. And I don't play those kiddie games anymore. You know, that phase? Everyone went through that phase, don't judge me. But I was wrong. This is a really fun game, and really deserving of actual appreciation if you ask me. I heard the first one did pretty well, which is the one we're talking about today. Next week and the following week, I'm gonna go over the sequels, because the series did well enough to warrant sequels. There do exist Star Force 2 and 3, and there were supposed to be 4, but we never got that one, though more on that later. Because I know everyone's talking about Battle Network right now, but like I said, Star Force is the one Mega Man series that everyone, even cult, fans of the series, just seems to completely overlook. And as someone who just got done playing the first one, that's not fair. At least the first one so far is a really good game. But I will let you know about 2 next week. Until then, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.